New title: Boring History for Sleep. Bizarre bites and sleepy feasts of the past. This title keeps the spirit of quirky medieval food exploration, but shifts focus with 70% different phrasing and structure. http://youtube.com watch PA sur 51 RBPSZC. 30 bullet outline. Step 1. Each bullet, one section, 8 words title, plus 1 sentence teaser. 1. Tonight's menu: survive or regret. Step into a smoky medieval tavern where even the air feels greasy and nothing on your plate is guaranteed edible. 2. The table's made of dirt. You sit at a wormy plank, dodging rats and chewing on stale bread like a champ. 3. Ale, the liquid bread substitute. Explore why weak beer was safer than water and why it sometimes made you hallucinate anyway. 4. Soup, so thin it whispered. Uncover the joys of broth you can see through and stews that reuse the same bone for days. 5. Cheese, hard as ethics. Your jaw cracks against rock-hard cheese that doubled as currency and a weapon if thrown. 6. Meat, questionable in origin. Gnaw on tough mystery meat. Possibly mutton, maybe squirrel, who's asking. 7. The sausage lottery begins. Hey guys, tonight we descend into the dim, smoky world of medieval feasting. A place where the stew pot never really emptied bread, could double as self-defense. And you might finish your meal with more fleas than you started with. You're not here to dine in elegance. No, tonight you're stepping into a rickety tavern where even the walls smell of onion sweat and ancient ale. The air is thick greasy from too many fires and too little ventilation. You duck under a low wooden beam that's permanently stained with soot and who knows what, and the first thing you see is a cracked bench and a long table caked in years of spilled drinks and congealed mystery sauce. Welcome to dinner. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from a cold bed in Boston, a balcony in Brazil, or a couch in Calgary, tell me your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little journey reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You ease on to the bench, wary of splinters, and take in the meal in front of you. A bowl of something brown, steaming faintly. You poke it with a spoon that's more liquid than solid, but not by much. This is pottage, the foundation of every peasant's existence. Grains may be barley or oats boiled with cabbage and onions if you're lucky. Turnips and leeks if you're not. A bit of salted meat if someone in the village made a good trade or got creative with roadkill. The pottage bubbles slightly. A film clings to the top like it's trying to escape. You stir it slowly. 1 carrot chunk. 2 slivers of what may be meat. The rest is a lumpy sludge. But hey, it's warm and that counts for something. You grab the bread next. Or maybe it grabs you. Hard, dark, and dense, it's made from rye or barley, whatever the village mill managed to crush into flour. You try to tear it in half. It resists. You try again. It breaks with a crack, not a tear. And yes, it tastes exactly like it looks like sadness, with a hint of straw. That's not poetic. There's literal straw in it sometimes. Millers added anything they could to stretch the grain ground peas, acorns, even powdered bark. Now, imagine your daily meal. Is this a cracked bowl of pottage and a brick of bread so tough you start to appreciate your dentist more. You chew slowly, not because you want to savor it, but because your jaw is pleading for time off. And this isn't a one-off. This is the default. Every day, every day. Breakfast bread and maybe ale. Lunch pottage. Dinner, surprise, it's more pottage. If variety is the spice of life, your medieval life is aggressively bland. Then again, this isn't entirely about nutrition. Food is survival, but it's also social. Even if you're gnawing on something barely edible, you're surrounded by others doing the same. You sit shoulder to shoulder with farmer shepherds and the local guy who talks to chickens. Conversation buzzes, mostly complaints about the weather or sheep. Laughter breaks out when someone drops their spoon into their pottage and can't find it. That's medieval stand-up. Of course, if you're a little better off, maybe you're dining at a manor hall. There, the food is more varied, roast meats, white bread, maybe a meat pie. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're here in the thick of peasant survival dining. And here's the kicker. This is the good season. Summer or autumn, when harvests are in and food isn't scarce. You haven't yet hit the hunger months, the lean winter stretch, where everything is salted, dried, or just wishful thinking. Historians still argue whether medieval diets were truly as monotonous as they seem, or if local variations offered more color than records suggest. Some point to herb gardens, wild greens, or occasional foraged mushrooms. Others say that's optimistic revisionism, and you can't forage flavor from a rock. Still tonight, you take another bite. The pottage is cooling fast, becoming stickier and harder to spoon. You chase it with a gulp of small ale, low alcohol beer brewed by nearly every household. Water's too risky. Beer's safer, sort of. As you sip, you smell it. The wood smoke, the sour breath of 100 mouths, the faint but unmistakable scent of goat in the corner. Your stomach makes a polite complaint, but it'll pass. It always does. You settle deeper onto the bench, rubbing your fingers on your tunic to wipe off crumbs and pottage spills. The day fades outside the tavern, but inside it's a timeless blur of chewing, coughing, and quiet laughter. The fire crackles low. Somewhere a child giggles, a spoon clatters, a rat scurries underfoot hopeful. You lift your bread chew again and wonder just briefly what noblemen are eating right now. It's probably something wrapped in pastry, probably roasted, probably not still moving. You shift on the bench, and a puff of dust rises from the floor. It mingles with smoke and stale air, settling into your clothes like a second skin. You glance down and realize the floor beneath you is dirt. Not packed stone, not tile, just raw earth scattered with straw splinters and the occasional suspicious stain. This is your table for the night, a splintered slab of wood resting unevenly on barrels smeared with candle wax dried ale and something sticky enough to trap your sleeve. The edges are worn smooth by generations of elbows, fists, and tankards. This table has heard everything. Confessions, arguments, lies about fish size and half-hearted wedding proposals. And you share it with 5 others, maybe 6 if someone squeezes in. One man is asleep on his plate. Another is carving something obscene into the table with a knife that's seen better centuries. To your right, a woman slurps pottage with a wooden spoon that looks more like a ladle. She sees you watching and offers a smile with only 3 teeth. You return the gesture sincerely because it's kind of nice here in a filthy, grimy way. A flicker of light from the hearth dances on the rough wooden beams above, casting long shadows across the room. Somewhere in the corner, a bard attempts to tune his lute. It sounds like a dying goose. He gives up after 3 chords and takes a drink instead. Priorities? Then come the rats. Not many. Just 2, maybe 3. They scamper across the far end of the tavern like they own the place. And to be fair, they sort of do. No one bats an eye. You make mental note not to leave your bread unattended. You run a hand across the tabletop and feel the grooves years of wear-knife scratches and what might be someone's initial burned into the surface. You spot a dried beetle trapped under a glob of wax. Poor thing. Probably came for the pottage. As you chew another bite of your own, you realize how close everyone sits. Elbow to elbow, spoon to spoon. There's no room for distance or delicacy. You bump someone's arm with your bowl. They grunt. You grunt back. Medieval table manners. Let's just say, it's a different standard. Forks are nowhere to be seen. Knives are common, but only because people carry their own. Eating is more of a hands-on experience, literally. You watch as someone dips 2 fingers into a communal dish, licks them clean, and goes right back in. No shame, no hesitation. Napkins. That's what sleeves are for. Or your neighbor's tunic if you're quick enough. There's a strange camaraderie in this chaos. Everyone's here to eat, not impress. Rich or poor, you share the same table, or at least the same airspace. You can almost hear the clatter of wooden bowls, the dull thud of a tankard being slammed, the wet slurp of soup, and the occasional unfiltered belch of satisfaction. It's loud, it's messy, it's home. Now let's talk about lighting. 1 candle for every 3 people if you're lucky. More often, you're dining by firelight, an open hearth that spits and cracks and occasionally throws sparks into someone's bowl. The shadows it casts make everyone look a little haunted, a little ghostly. You're all flickering between worlds, warm here, freezing just beyond the door. There's no menu, of course. What you get is what's made. And what's made depends on what's in season, what hasn't spoiled, or what someone found on the roadside that still twitched this morning. Historians still argue whether rural taverns functioned as true eateries or just hubs for gossip and homemade beer. Most agree it was a little of both, with food more of a suggestion than a guarantee. Tonight, the cook is a barrel-chested man with arms like tree trunks and a temper that simmers like his stew. He barks orders to a teenage helper who's busy scraping burnt porridge off the bottom of a pot. The cook spits into the fire and stirs something questionable. You decide not to watch too closely. Still food aside, it's the atmosphere that keeps people coming. There's laughter, there's song, even if it's slightly off-key, and there's a feeling that just for now you're not freezing in a field or hauling manure in the rain. You're inside, you're fed, and that's enough. A man to your left nudges you and offers a toothpick, well a sliver of wood, then promptly uses his own to pick something from between his molars with great ceremony. You politely decline. Suddenly, someone starts telling a story. It begins with, there once was a monk with a drinking problem, and it only goes downhill from there. Everyone leans in eager mugs raised. You try to follow, but the accent is thick, and the punchline involves a chicken, a bishop, and a chamber pot. It's funnier than it should be, and in that moment, mismatched laughter, clinking bowls, the warmth of fire, you realize medieval dining wasn't refined. but it was real. Messy, communal, and unapologetically human. You could almost forget the stale bread and questionable pottage. Almost. You lift your cup wooden, slightly cracked, and take a tentative sip. It's ale, but not the kind you'd recognize from a grocery store shelf. This isn't hoppy or citrusy or brewed for flavor. It's what they call small beer, a weak, watery drink with just enough alcohol to kill some of the bacteria lurking in medieval water supplies. It tastes earthy, a little sour, and warm. Definitely warm. You try not to think about how it was made in a wooden tub with leftover grain mash, sometimes fermented, using a chunk of bread crust or whatever lived at the bottom of the last batch. Brewing was often done by women known as brewsters, whose skills determined whether you stayed hydrated or regretted everything. You take another sip. It's not terrible, and at least it's safer than the well water, which could be carrying anything from dead frogs to plague residue. In fact, even kids drank small beer. It was the Gatorade of the medieval world, hydration with a side of mild dizziness. Historians still argue whether medieval ale consistently contained enough alcohol to sterilize water, or if it simply masked the taste of rot. Either way, you're sipping it now like it's life-giving nectar, which, let's face it, it kind of is. You notice that everyone has a cup like yours, some with chipped rims, others marked with carved initials or poorly scratched drawings. The guy next to you has what looks like a crude unicorn etched into his mug. It might also be a dog, or a horse, or an accidental line. Doesn't matter. It's his cup, and no one else is drinking from it. Sharing wasn't common when it came to drinkware. That's how you got lice, or worse. You set the mug down and lean back slightly, listening to the din of the tavern rise around you. Behind the bar there's a single cask of something stronger, likely mead or rough cider, but it's expensive, and only the local reeve or visiting knight might spring for a cup. The ale, on the other hand, is for everyone, brewed in bulk, stored in barrels that occasionally leak and consumed before it turns. Because yes, even beer can go bad, especially when stored next to pickled eels and salted hides. A woman nearby slams her mug down and burps with pride. Cheers erupt. It's not rude, it's considered healthy. Better out than in, especially when your entire diet consists of beans, bread, and bitter drink. Speaking of beans, someone brings over a communal bowl of them mashed and reboiled until they form a thick paste. It smells faintly of garlic, but more powerfully of regret. You scoop a bit onto your crusty bread, take a bite, and immediately feel your stomach start to protest. Medieval digestion wasn't for the faint of heart. The ale helps. Sorta. Then there's the side effect no one talks about. You start to feel airy. Beans and ale. It's a combination that produces atmospheric results. The tavern seems to accept this. Every now and then a breeze wafts by that's not from the hearth, and everyone pretends it's nothing. A shared silence of mutual understanding. You glance around again. A few patrons are getting loud. A game of dice has started in the corner, played on the floor because the table is still covered in drying stew. The players shout, laugh, accuse each other of cheating, then laugh again. You see one of them slip an extra coin from his sleeve, and no one cares. Medieval taverns weren't just places to eat and drink. They were the heart of village life. People came here to hear news, settle arguments, find work, and occasionally start fights over cheese. The ale loosened tongues and made everyone slightly braver, sometimes dangerously so. You lean forward, elbows on the table, your cup between your hands. It's calming now, this moment. The chaos becomes background music, spoon scraping bowls, dog barking outside, someone retching softly behind the firewood pile. Comforting in a weird way. You take another sip of ale and let it sit on your tongue. Still sour, still warm, still better than water that's probably upstream from someone's latrine. Brewing, you recall, was an essential household task, especially in cities. Some women brewed so successfully they ran small taverns out of their homes with signs hanging outside like a bush tied above the door to show ale was available. Good ale became a reputation passed by word of mouth. Bad ale, well, you probably just didn't come back. And yes, taxes applied to it. Local authorities loved to tax ale. They sent inspectors called ale conners to taste and approve brews. Imagine having that job, spending your day wandering from house to house, sampling suspicious homebrew and writing angry notes about under-fermented barley. Tonight, no one's inspecting this tavern. The ale's flowing, the mugs are clinking, and the drinkers are glowing red from firelight and intoxication. It's not about taste. It's about warmth, company, a safe-ish place to be when the wind howls outside and the forest doesn't welcome visitors after dark. You refill your cup from the communal pitcher, already learning not to let it sit empty for too long. There's a rhythm to this life. Drink, laugh, chew, sigh. Repeat. You exhale and take another sip. Yep, still warm. Your cup is nearly empty now, the dregs swirling gently at the bottom like a muddy prediction of tomorrow's headache. You set it aside with care. If it cracks, there's no spare, and turn your attention to the next dish arriving at the table. It's soup, or at least it claims to be. A thin, watery broth sloshes in a wooden bowl, steam curling weakly into the air like it's unsure whether to bother. You brace yourself as the bowl is placed in front of you with a dull thunk. The surface ripples with mystery. There's a chunk of onion drifting like a ghost ship, maybe a bit of barley, and something greenish-gray that you hope is a leaf. You dip your spoon, more ladle than utensil, and stir cautiously. No meat. Of course not. It's fasting soup eaten during religious observances when meat was forbidden and excitement was outlawed. You raise the spoon and taste it. It's hot. That's the best thing you can say. The broth whispers across your tongue with all the flavor of damp cloth and silent penance. You swallow and immediately feel hungrier, and yet you eat it. Because this is dinner. Because tomorrow might be worse. Because even a warm bowl of disappointment beats an empty stomach on a cold night. Historians still argue whether these soups had nutritional merit or simply functioned as spiritual placeholders. Some say they were packed with root vegetables and herbs. Others suggest they were mostly hot water with a prayer stirred in. Your bowl tonight leans toward the latter. You glance around. Others are eating too with practiced indifference. No one complains. No one expects more. A child dunks a crust of bread into their bowl, watching it disintegrate before slurping it up with glee. Their parent chuckles softly either at the child or at the irony of joy found in broth. And it wasn't just peasant fare. Even nobles during religious fasts endured meatless days. They compensated with creative loopholes, like serving beaver tails because beavers swim and therefore counted as fish. Logic so medieval, it circles back around to brilliance. You slurp again. The broth is thinner now, and the bottom of the bowl reveals a sludgy sediment of boiled grain. It sticks to your spoon like a stubborn memory. You chew and try not to analyze. Across the room, the cook ladles more soup from a massive cauldron that's probably older than the tavern itself. It hangs over the fire, blackened and battered, a permanent resident of its iron hook. Inside, the soup bubbles, slowly sending up the occasional burp of steam and regret. The cook mutters something to his apprentice, likely a reminder not to lean too far in. Last week, a sleeve caught fire again. The fire crackles, casting shifting light across the bowls and mugs, turning your fellow diners into flickering silhouettes. It's like eating in a dream, dim, warm, repetitive. The kind of dream where the food's always just okay and you keep chewing anyway. Then there's a noise, a wet splat followed by a groan. Someone spilled their soup. It hits the dirt floor with a squish, and the dog that lives under the table darts out to lick it up. You didn't even know there was a dog. No one says anything. This is life. Soup falls, dogs eat, you move on. The woman next to you wipes her spoon on her tunic, clearly unbothered by the stain that now resembles a medieval map. She offers you a piece of bread to soak up your last spoonful of broth. It's stale, but it helps. You thank her with a nod and she grunts approval through a mouthful of beans. You wonder if she's the village healer or the butcher's aunt. Everyone wears the same rough-spun wool dyed in various shades of dirt. Identifying people by occupation is a guessing game. Someone starts humming a tune, a soft, repetitive melody with no clear beginning or end. It winds through the room like smoke, nestling into your ears and settling your nerves. You don't recognize the song, but it doesn't matter. It sounds like soup, bland but comforting. You finish the last of your broth scraping the bowl with the edge of your spoon, a small, satisfying scrape. Then you set it down and rest your hands on the table. The wood is warm beneath your palms, stained with age and use. This table has outlived many owners. It'll outlive you too. In a far corner, someone snoring, already head down on folded arms. Others sit in silence, staring into the fire or their bowls. You do the same. There's a calm here, a kind of resignation that doubles as peace. You're full, or at least not hungry. That's enough. Soup like this doesn't fill your stomach so much as it fills the time between hunger and sleep. It slows your breath, warms your chest, and makes the world feel manageable for a few minutes. You close your eyes just for a moment and listen. Fire, spoons, laughter, a distant burp. The quiet rhythm of a world where nothing's fast and nothing's easy, but everything keeps moving. You open your eyes to a new dish being passed down the bench, a block of something pale, firm, and oddly cube-shaped. It hits the table with a thunk, bouncing once before landing in front of you. A dull wedge of hard cheese. You pick it up. It's surprisingly heavy for its size, like it holds secrets. This isn't your creamy brie or your dainty goat cheese. This is medieval cheese, aged sharp and dense enough to double as a doorstop or an improvised weapon. It smells like a barn in spring, and the texture is closer to chalk than cream. One bite, and your jaw knows it's working overtime tonight. The cheese crumbles slightly in your hand, leaving behind oily dust. You take a cautious nibble. It's sour, salty, and strangely satisfying. In a world where meat is scarce and vegetables are a gamble, this stuff is dependable. A hunk of protein, calories, and taste that could survive a journey across a muddy kingdom without refrigeration or even wrapping. You gnaw and chew, wincing slightly, wondering if your molars will survive this experience. A man 2 seats down taps his cheese against the table before eating as if testing its integrity. Another woman tucks hers into a cloth for later, or maybe to throw at someone who owes her rent. And cheese was versatile. Made from sheep's milk, goat's milk, or the occasional indulgence of cow's milk, it could be eaten fresh or aged for months. You could cook with it, melt it, or let it dry out so thoroughly that it became nearly eternal. Historians still argue whether this kind of cheese was eaten for taste or simply because it outlasted bread. Evidence suggests it might have been both. Cheese that didn't mold became prized survival food. You look closer. There's something embedded in yours, maybe a time leaf, maybe something less intentional. Either way, you keep eating. Around you, others do the same. There's something communal about sharing cheese. It's solid, tradable, sliceable, a currency of sorts. In fact, in some villages, cheese was used in barter, 3 wheels for a cloak, half a wheel for a goose. It held value not just for nutrition, but for its sheer stubborn durability. Unlike stew cheese, didn't slosh away. It held firm. A boy walks by holding a small round wheel tied with string, swinging it like a toy. His mother snatches it away, scolding him before slicing it into even wedges for her family. They eat it silently, reverently, with the seriousness of people who don't take calories for granted. You glance back at your own chunk, half gone. Your mouth is dry from the salt, and your ale is finished. You raise your hand, and a jug is passed your way. Another warm pour of liquid bread to wash down the edible brick in your mouth. To think this was lunch, dinner, and sometimes breakfast. A slab of cheese and bread, possibly with onion. Occasionally with a dried fruit or smear of lard. That was the medieval version of a protein bar. Compact, portable, resistant to the elements, and surprisingly filling if you ignored the taste. In noble households, cheese was fancier, of course. They might roll it in herbs, pair it with imported honey, or mold it into elaborate shapes to show off at banquets. But for you tonight, in this creaking tavern, it's a rough square of dairy determination. One man across the room tells a joke involving cheese, a monk, and a runaway pig. The punchline is indecipherable through his accent, but the laughter suggests it landed well. You chuckle along partly in confusion, partly because the cheese has softened your mood. By now the candle wax has pooled, the fire's coals are glowing low, and most of the bowls have been licked clean. You lean back, letting the meal settle. There's a pleasant heaviness in your belly, like you've eaten something meant to keep you alive another day. You run your tongue along your teeth. A bit of cheese is still lodged between 2 molars. You leave it there, a small edible souvenir of tonight's medieval feast. And just before you drift, you recall something. This was the easy food, the portable, reliable, not totally foul option. The real culinary chaos is still ahead. The next dish arrives with far less ceremony and far more uncertainty. It's meat, supposedly. You blink at the slice resting on the communal platter and try to guess the animal it came from. It's brown, grayish at the edges and tough enough that someone nearby is already sawing through theirs with a knife that could double as a gardening tool. You tap it with your spoon. It responds with a faint thud. That's not promising. Still, you reach for it. One jagged bite later, and your jaw regrets every choice that brought you here. It's sinewy, chewy, and gamier than you expected. You pause, unsure whether it's mutton goat or something less common. Possibly squirrel. Could even be cat. No one's saying. In the medieval world, meat was precious and rare. For most peasants, meat was a feast day treat, maybe stretched thin in a soup or chopped into a communal pie on Saint Days. Tonight must be special, or someone's been poaching again. The flavor is earthy, musky. You chew like your life depends on it, because it kind of does. Swallowing without full breakdown could lead to hours of digestive debate between your stomach and intestines. You glance across the table and see a man holding up a bone like a relic. He gnaws at it with satisfaction, then hands it to the dog beneath the table. The dog accepts it with royal dignity. Everyone wins. Historians still argue whether medieval communities regularly consumed wild game or relied mostly on livestock. Game hunting was technically illegal for peasants' royal forests, and noble lands were fiercely protected, but enforcement was spotty. And a hare in a snare could mean the difference between hunger and survival. So yes, maybe this is rabbit or pigeon, or given the texture, hedgehog. Wrapped in clay and baked in ashes, hedgehogs were a known peasant delicacy in some regions. You try not to think too hard about it as you take another bite. The flavor improves slightly, or you've just gone numb. There's a chunk of gristle that resists your efforts. You finally give up and discreetly hide it under your bread crust. A common technique. Waste not, but also chew not, if you wish to keep your teeth. The man beside you offers salt from a pouch on his belt. It's a generous gesture. Salt wasn't cheap. It preserved meat, seasoned food, and paid wages in some parts of the world. You accept a pinch and sprinkle it carefully across what remains of your mystery meat. The flavor sharpens, almost like food now. The cook passes by and grins, revealing exactly 0 teeth. He slaps someone on the back hard enough to jostle their tankard and mutters something about boar haunch. You suspect he's joking, or lying, or proud. Possibly all three. You watch others eat. Most don't ask questions. They slice, chew, and swallow with the resignation of people who've seen worse, because they have. A stew from last winter allegedly contained leather, and once someone tried to pass off rat as lamb. You heard the town priest nearly fainted, but tonight there's at least protein. And even if the meat's origin is fuzzy, it's filling. You feel it settle deep in your gut like a weighted blanket anchoring you to the bench. Your body relaxes a bit. Food is food. A child nearby gnaws on a drumstick. Possibly bird, possibly not, with the fierce focus of someone who understands this might be their only meat for weeks. The child's mother wipes their chin with the edge of her sleeve, then takes a bite of her own eyes, half closed in relief. A new plate appears, more meat, or at least a different cut. It's fatty, streaked with gelatinous pieces and smells of smoke. You realize it's been preserved, salted, and possibly hung over the hearth for weeks. It has the glossy sheen of something both edible and alarming. You slice off a sliver and pop it into your mouth. It's salty. So salty it curls your tongue, but the fat melts a little as you chew. It's satisfying in a primal way. This is not about taste. It's about calories. You're fueling a body that digs, ditches, hauls stones, or threshes grain for 10 hours a day. Delicate cuisine has no place here. There's a joke making its way down the table, something about a nobleman, a goose, and the queen's missing glove. It makes little sense, but you laugh anyway, partly out of politeness, partly because the ale's soft buzz is catching up to your senses. Someone raises a toast. To meat that may or may not bite back, and the table responds with a cheer and several loud clanks of mugs, yours included. By the end of the meal, your jaw is sore, your belt slightly tighter, and your mind fuzzier than before. The dog under the table licks up stray bones with expertise. Someone slips a half-eaten slice into their pocket for later. Another wraps theirs in cloth and tucks it beneath their tunic like a treasured heirloom. Because here nothing is wasted. Not time, not meat, not even the bones which will be boiled tomorrow for soup that might whisper just faintly of actual flavor. You lean back again, letting the meat settle like a stone in your belly. The bench creaks beneath you, and for a brief moment the tavern seems to slow. The air thickens with the scent of smoke and sweat and something new, sausage. You look up just in time to see a plate of them arrive, greasy links coiled like snakes on a pewter tray. The smell hits first strong, spicy, and vaguely alarming. You're both curious and mildly afraid, rightfully so. Medieval sausages were a gamble. You reach for one. It's slick to the touch, the casing glistening with a sheen of rendered fat and ambition. You bite in cautiously. The texture is chewy, the flavor aggressively seasoned pepper, maybe garlic, maybe something unidentifiable that burns just a little going down. It's not bad, but it's not exactly good either. Sausages in the Middle Ages were the original food lottery. If you were lucky, you got a link packed with decent cuts, awful blood scraps of pork or lamb. If you were less lucky, you might get gristle bone dust or bits from animals whose identities were best left mysterious. Sometimes herbs helped. Sometimes not even divine intervention could. One medieval cook supposedly added breadcrumbs, boiled rice, or chestnut paste as filler. Others just threw in whatever was on hand. The goal was preservation and palatability, not culinary excellence. Historians still argue whether these sausages were commonly made at home or purchased from town butchers who sold them hanging in windows like edible wind chimes. Evidence from some monastic kitchens shows recipes that included ingredients like cinnamon, ginger, and dried fruit. Others suggest that most sausages, especially those in peasant taverns like this one, were more survival than celebration. You bite again and hit a peppercorn. It surprises you into coughing, which earns a sympathetic laugh from your neighbor who's having even less luck. Their sausage split mid-bite and dripped onto their tunic, leaving an oily badge of honor. Still, there's something undeniably satisfying about it. The crunch of the casing, the warmth of the fat, the way your stomach accepts it like a long-lost friend. Or maybe just like a guest who overstays their welcome but brings gifts. The tavern's mood lifts slightly. Meat has that effect. So does spice, which was rare and expensive. If your sausage had spice in it, you were either near a trade route or someone in the kitchen was really trying to impress or cover up something suspicious. The cook walks past, whistling, now ladle in hand. You catch him glancing at the sausage plate with pride. Or mischief, possibly both. You raise your half-eaten link like a toast. He winks. A woman across the table begins telling a story, half urban legend, half dinner, warning about a sausage found to contain pigeon feathers, beetle shells, and a fragment of bone with a tiny human tooth. No one seems fazed. Someone else pipes up, "Still better than last Lent's eel pie." A round of laughter follows. You're starting to understand this rhythm. The jokes, the low standards, the shared suspicion, wrapped in communal warmth. You chew more slowly now, savoring the spice, or maybe bracing for whatever internal battle is brewing. One man dips his sausage in mustard, bright tangy, and made from ground seeds and vinegar. You didn't even realize mustard was on the table. He slides the small pot toward you. Grateful you try it. A jolt of sour heat that cuts right through the meat's heaviness. Now it tastes like flavor on purpose. There's a small child at the edge of the room watching everyone eat. No plate in hand, just watching. After a moment, the cook passes him a sausage end. The child accepts it like treasure, vanishing behind the barrels with it clutched tight. Another little victory in the tavern's quiet hierarchy. You realize the sausages are nearly gone. The plate is down to a few sad bits of fat and one overly charred link that no one wants to claim. Until someone does muttering, "Waste not," before biting in and immediately regretting it. The fire burns lower now. The walls flicker with shadows. Your belly full of questionable meat and seasoned courage begins to feel a gentle weight of satisfaction. You haven't felt this full in days, maybe weeks. Still, you're aware that every bite might be a gamble, that tomorrow could greet you with stomach pain and the kind of regret that makes you swear off meat for months. But tonight, you're warm, full, and surrounded by people who understand exactly what it means to chew first and question later. And hey, so far you're winning the sausage lottery. You rest your hands on your stomach, now gently protesting the rapid arrival of beans, cheese, sausage, and whatever that meat was. Just as your body starts negotiating peace terms, another bowl arrives, filled to the brim with beans. Of course, they're mashed this time, and someone's added herbs parsley, or maybe just crushed weeds with ambition. The beans are pale, creamy, and steaming. You pick up your spoon and sigh softly, as though greeting an old friend who never quite knows when to leave. One bite, and it's exactly as you expected, dense, chalky, and alarmingly filling. The herbs do help, at least psychologically. You pretend it's gourmet. You pretend it wasn't just boiled, mashed, and salted within an inch of its fibrous life. Beans were the backbone of the medieval peasant diet, cheap, high in protein, and capable of growing in less than ideal soils. Fava beans, broad beans, even lentils made frequent appearances on medieval plates, or bowls, or pieces of stale bread used as plates. You chew, and then chew some more. Beans don't give in easily, and yet despite their practicality, beans came with consequences, social ones, the kind that turn a crowded tavern into a tactical gas chamber. You feel a gurgle in your gut already, and you're not alone. The tavern has shifted. People squirm a bit on benches. One man coughs loudly to cover an awkward noise. Another casually scoots his stool a few inches from his neighbor. You breathe through your mouth and keep eating. Everyone knows. No one says a word. Beans were a daily necessity and a nightly curse. Monks complained about them in cloisters. Farmers joked about them in the fields. Even nobility, when forced to eat them during Lenten fasts, wrote long, flowery laments about the digestive aftermath. Historians still argue whether medieval recipes included specific herbs like fennel or mint to mitigate the gas. Some records suggest yes. Others imply people simply embraced the inevitable. Judging by tonight's tavern atmosphere, it was the latter. The cook, as if reading the room, tosses another log into the hearth. The crackling fire and rising smoke help mask other emissions. Small mercy. You stir the beans with your spoon, watching steam curl upward. The texture is thick like paste. You remember hearing that in colder seasons, people would leave bean pots simmering all day over the fire, adding bits as they went, onion, garlic, maybe a scrap of bacon, if they were lucky. But mostly, it was just beans, day after day after day. And the thing is, they worked. Cheap, easy to store, high in energy. If you were building a cathedral, or plowing fields, or hauling firewood uphill both ways, in the snow beans kept you standing, even if you wished you were lying down. Someone next to you adds a drizzle of oil to their bowl. It glistens like gold in the firelight, and you blink actual oil, maybe pressed from walnuts or hemp seed, a rare luxury. You glance around to see if anyone else notices. They do. The man spoons faster, shielding his bowl with his elbows. You take another bite. This time, the flavor hits differently. Earthy, real, almost satisfying. There's something honest about beans. They don't pretend to be exciting, they're just there, filling the void. A soft groan comes from a man slouched in his corner. He clutches his stomach and mutters something about the bean devil. A few people chuckle. One woman offers him a piece of charred bread to soak up the noise. He accepts with gratitude and silence. Someone else at the table reminisces about last year's harvest feast, where the beans were served with roasted garlic and honey. A rare combination, likely accidental, but it lives on as legend. You imagine it a dish that tastes like hope. Tonight's beans do not. You scrape your bowl clean and place your spoon gently atop it. Full again. Almost too full. You feel like a wineskin left in the sun, warm, bloated, and suspiciously squeaky inside. And yet, there's camaraderie in the shared bloating, a quiet understanding that no one leaves a tavern untouched by beans. You look around. The dog has retreated under the table tail tucked. Even he knows. You sit back once more, breathing slowly, resisting the urge to groan. The fire pops. The wind rattles the shutters. Your stomach shifts, unsure whether to settle in or declare mutiny. A bard tunes his lute again, this time successfully. He strums a slow, sleepy melody. One by one, diners lean into the rhythm. A soft burp punctuates the silence like applause. You close your eyes. The world slows. And somewhere under the layers of ale, sausage, and beans, your body starts to forgive you. Just when you think your digestive tract has negotiated a fragile truce, a slab of something new appears in front of you. It's meat again, but not the usual slab. This one glistens, it sparkles, it shines with the shimmer of preserved survival. Salt pork. You lift it with caution. It's stiff, slightly rubbery, and coated in a crystal dusting of salt that crunches audibly beneath your fingers. The smell hits neck smoky brainy and somehow damp despite being cured. You take a bite. It's intense. Salt pork is not here to make friends. It's here to keep you alive. It was the medieval food of endurance meat, soaked in brine, cured for weeks, sometimes months, until every fiber of the pig surrendered itself to preservation. Chewing it is a battle. Your jaw protests. Your teeth slide over a waxy, fat cap. The salt stings the back of your throat, but it delivers calories and protein, and in a world without refrigeration, that's as good as gold. You drink ale to chase the taste, and even the ale seems offended. Still, salt pork was a staple, especially in winter when fresh meat was long gone and beans had worn out their welcome. It could be boiled, fried, thrown into stew, or just gnawed on like a particularly chewy regret. If it was too tough, you boiled it until it gave up. If it was too salty, you boiled it again. And if it still didn't improve, you fed it to your enemies or your in-laws. Historians still argue whether salt pork was common in peasant homes or reserved for military rations and maritime voyages. Evidence points to both. Sailors practically lived on it. Armies marched with it in their sacks. Villagers traded for it when pigs were scarce. Tonight, it's on your plate, or what's left of it. A boy 2 seats down bites into his with gusto and immediately regrets it. His face twists. He coughs once, then like a true veteran swallows and keeps chewing. The rest of the tavern nods in approval. You chew more slowly. The flavor is persistent. Even after you swallow the salt, lingers like a rude guest. You chase it with another gulp of ale, which doesn't help much, but gives your jaw a chance to rest. Someone across the table is scraping their pork onto a hunk of bread, using the dry crust to absorb the grease. Another is slicing the fat off and feeding it to the tavern dog, who accepts it like a furry garbage disposal. One man simply sets his aside and mutters something about saving it for sharpening tools later. The texture varies from piece to piece. Some parts are tender enough to pass for meat. Others resemble leather or something you'd patch a roof with. The fat is soft but greasy, clinging to your fingers with the tenacity of guilt. You wipe it on your tunic, like everyone else. There's something slightly surreal about eating food that feels more like a chore than a treat. But that was the point. Salt pork was never a delicacy, it was insurance. It was what you packed when you didn't know if you'd eat tomorrow. It was food that didn't rot, mold, or betray you unless you had high expectations. And it filled you up. A few bites, and your stomach feels heavier than your boots. You lean back again, your spine aching against the hard bench, and listen to the tavern creak and murmur around you. The fire is lower now, glowing like an ember-filled sigh. The bard has stopped strumming. The dog is snoring. Somewhere, someone is humming off-key but gentle. You look at what's left of the salt pork. You consider one last bite. You decide against it. Instead, you push the plate forward and rest your hands on the table. You can still taste the salt. You suspect you'll still taste it tomorrow, maybe forever. You feel your lips crack slightly from the brine, but you're warm, you're full, and salt pork, as unpleasant as it is, did its job. A woman to your left raises her mug and declares, "To meat that survives better than we do." Laughter erupts. Glasses clink. Bread is torn. The salt pork sits quietly smug and eternal. And for a moment, you wonder if it's not you digesting the pork, but the pork digesting you. Just when your taste buds begin to recover from their salt pork trauma, a new dish slinks onto the table like a culinary dare. Dried fish, thin twisted strips of flesh that look like they were once aquatic, then abandoned in the sun to become relics of protein past. You stare at the curled, brittle slab resting on the plate. It's so dry it almost rattles when moved. You pick up a piece. It bends stiffly, resisting gravity. The smell is assertive, pungent, like the sea, but after it spent a week fermenting in a boot. Dried fish was medieval Europe's answer to both religious fasts and food scarcity. When meat was forbidden by the church, or simply unavailable, fish stepped up to the plate. Poor fish. Poor you. You take a bite. It shatters like kindling. Sharp edges scrape your tongue. Your jaw moves instinctively, slowly grinding the salty fibers into submission. It tastes like fish jerky made by someone who's only heard rumors of seasoning. You reach for ale. The combination doesn't help. Around you, others are chewing too. No one's enjoying it exactly, but they're getting through it. A communal endurance. A kind of culinary team sport. One woman dips her dried fish in mustard grimaces, then shrugs and keeps going. A man next to her doesn't even chew. He just sucks on it slowly like it's a snack stick from purgatory. You hear someone mutter, "Better than turnip stew," and receive solemn nods. Dried fish, especially. Stockfish was imported in bulk from the North Sea and Iceland. Cod haddock or ling gutted and dried on wooden racks in cold air until it became essentially immortal. It was tough, it was bland, it was blessedly non-perishable. Historians still argue whether stockfish was rehydrated properly before eating or simply gnawed on like a piece of driftwood. Some texts suggest soaking it overnight in milk or ale. Others imply that desperate diners simply roasted or pounded it into edible humility. Tonight, your piece is definitely not rehydrated. It's crunching like gravel between your teeth. But oddly, you don't mind. After salt pork, everything else feels like dessert. The cook, seeing the growing pile of bones and fish scraps, claps his hands and announces something vaguely cheerful. A joke, a threat, hard to say over the roar of laughter that follows. He disappears into the kitchen, leaving you to contemplate your increasingly fish-scented fingers. At the edge of the room, a small bucket holds brine-soaked scraps, fish heads, skins, spines. Nothing is wasted. Later, it'll all be boiled down into tomorrow's broth, or used as bait, or both. You notice that some of the diners are turning their fish into stew, breaking it apart, and dropping it into lukewarm pottage to soften. A clever move. You follow their lead. The fish sinks slowly into the grainy mixture, releasing a swirl of oil and salt. You stir, wait a few moments, then take another bite. It's still tough, but now there's warmth. A strange comfort. Like eating memories of the sea long after the tide has gone out. Someone near the hearth raises a finger and declares, "This fish once swam in the fjords of Norway." Someone else responds, "Then it died of boredom." Everyone laughs, including you. Humor is essential here. So is resilience and fire. The dried fish disappears slowly, methodically, not because it's beloved, but because hunger and habit are strong motivators. And yet, there's something respectable about dried fish. It asks nothing of you, but it gives. Protein, calories, salt. Chewy reflection. You could survive a siege with it, sail a ship with it, bury it in a sack and eat it 10 years later with minimal regrets. You tear off another strip. This one flakes slightly at the edge, an improvement. You chew with patience. Behind you, someone starts singing a low sea shanty, the kind with a 3-note melody and 27 verses. People hum along. The tavern settles into a rhythmic lull. A song, a chew, a clink, a laugh. You feel it again, that warmth that comes not from the food itself, but from sharing it, enduring it, living through it together. You glance at your bowl. A few scraps left. One more bite. It's sharp, salty, familiar now. Your body doesn't protest. In fact, it accepts it, maybe even appreciates it. Because in this world, dried fish means you're not hungry. You're not starving. You're just chewing something that smells like old nets and tastes like survival. And tonight, that's enough. You've barely wiped the fish oil from your lips when the mood in the tavern suddenly changes. The sound of chairs scraping back, bowls being cleared, and voices dropping lower as something else takes the center of the table, an announcement in the form of silence. Fasting food. You see the platter, and even before it reaches you, you recognize the texture eel, long, glossy, and disturbingly smug-looking, curled into itself like it still remembers how to slither. Your spoon hesitates. It's not that eel is bad. In fact, it was a prized delicacy in some parts, rich in fat, easy to catch in muddy rivers, and most importantly, it counted as fish during religious fasts. Because if it swims, the church deemed it permissible, and eels definitely swam with enthusiasm. You take a tentative bite. The meat is soft, fatty, and slightly sweet. But there's also something suspiciously boneless about it. Slippery, almost like it doesn't want to be chewed. You manage anyway. Historians still argue whether the widespread consumption of eel during Lent was born out of necessity flavor or clever religious loopholes. In truth, probably all three. Nobles liked it roasted and glazed. Monks liked it boiled and penitent. You're eating it because someone shoved it in front of you and said, "Eat." It's Friday. Eel wasn't the only loophole. During the fasting season, creative cooking reached wild theological heights. Barnacle geese, migratory birds, were once believed to hatch from sea foam, so they were classified as sea creatures and cleared for Fridays. Beavers had tails. Tails looked like fish. So, beavers, that's were fish. That was the logic. It held. Tonight, however, there's no beaver on the table, no mythical goose, just eel, coiled next to a gray stew that may or may not include leeks, and something that looks like boiled bread soaked in broth. The textures all blend together, smooth, soft, humble. You chew the eel again. It's better this time. The richness sits warmly in your chest. You take a sip of ale technically allowed during fasts and glance at the others. No one's celebrating, but no one's complaining either. Fasting food was meant to remind you of virtue, of sacrifice, of spiritual discipline. But it also had to fill you up. Monks, after all, weren't surviving on prayers alone. So kitchens found ways to make fasting food stretch, adding grains, dried fruits, and thick broths. In some monasteries, they even developed multi-course fish feasts so extravagant they'd rival noble banquets, all within the rules. Tonight's tavern meal is simpler. Eel, soft root vegetables, maybe a bit of lentil mush, a blob of fish paste wrapped in cabbage leaves. Your spoon squishes through it with little resistance. You pause between bites to watch the fire. It burns lower now, just glowing coals and a lazy flicker of flame. The tavern has quieted. Fasting food slows everything down, your chewing, your thoughts, even your conversation. There's something sacred in the silence, or maybe everyone's just sleepy. You hear someone whisper a prayer before eating, not loudly, not for show, just a soft murmur of thanks. You nod to yourself. It fits. Fasting wasn't just about food, it was about mood, reflection, a kind of forced reset, when the body reminded the spirit to hush for a while, but you're also reminded of the reality behind the ritual, the hunger, the substitutes, the slow ache in the stomach that even holy loopholes couldn't fully soothe. And yet, eel helped. It filled the space. Rich in fat and flavor, it left you warm if not exactly satisfied. You take another bite, this one more willingly. The texture has grown on you. soft, creamy, a bit buttery, if you squint your imagination. A woman across the table picks up her eel with 2 fingers, slurps it quickly, and shrugs. Better than snow soup, she says. Everyone nods in agreement. Snow soup, a cruel joke in some villages where boiled water with herbs and hope counted as a meal. You finish your eel and wipe your hands on your tunic. The grease smears in, but at least it's not fish bones. The tavern settles further. Plates are scraped. Bowls are stacked. People lean into one another's shoulders, some nodding off others, simply full of thoughts and food, and maybe a little repentance. You stretch your legs beneath the table, flexing your feet against packed earth. Your belly isn't quite full, but it's content. There's a softness to the end of a fast day meal that doesn't come with roasts or pies, just the quiet knowledge that you've eaten enough, and that maybe, just maybe, you've made peace with the eel. You're thinking the meal might be finished. How much more could your medieval stomach reasonably endure when the next item arrives with an almost theatrical thunk? A wooden basket lined with straw, filled with eggs. Simple, innocent, deceptive. The man delivering them holds one up to the firelight, inspecting it like a jeweler appraising a gem. Then he cracks it gently against the rim of his bowl and drops it into his soup without fanfare. No one flinches. No one asks, "How old is that egg?" You pick one up. It's warm from the hearth, speckled brown and lighter than expected. You tap it on your spoon, and the shell fractures easily. Inside, the yolk sloshes lazily. Seems fine, you think. Eggs were a staple when available. Chickens didn't lay year-round, and in colder months, eggs were scarce or hoarded. When they did appear, they were eaten quickly or preserved in ash brine or even lime water. You take a whiff. This one smells normal, or at least not wrong. You drop it into your bowl and swirl. A soft boil is underway in the stew pot, and you suspect your dinner is about to become breakfast. And that's not a bad thing. Eggs were versatile in the Middle Ages. Scrambled, poached, baked into pies, or beaten into batters. They were also portable, ideal for travel, and symbolic, tied to fertility, spring, and rebirth. But they weren't always fresh, and not always from chickens. Historians still argue whether medieval market vendors regularly sold rotten eggs on purpose or simply lacked the ability or will to check. Some records suggest certain street peddlers in larger cities had reputations for overaged wares. You imagine someone making that mistake once, only once. Your egg swirls in the broth and finally firms up. You scoop it out. The white is soft, barely holding together. You break it open and taste it. Warm, creamy, surprisingly delicious. You glance around and see others doing the same, some dipping their eggs into salt, others eating them whole in 2 bites. One man juggles slightly, burns his fingers, and mutters a string of words that earn him a glare from the innkeeper. The mood lifts slightly. Eggs do that. They're familiar, easy, and momentarily indulgent, especially after the salted meats and dried horrors of the last course. A woman near the hearth is peeling several boiled eggs for her children. She rolls them in herbs, dips them into the family's shared bowl of grain mash, and distributes them evenly. No complaints, just small nods of gratitude. You eat the rest of yours slowly, enjoying the contrast of the warm yolk against the cool air creeping in through the window. You think about hens scratching in the dust, nesting in hay, occasionally disappearing only to return weeks later with 7 chicks and a smug attitude. You think about what it takes to protect an egg from rats, from cold, from thieves. It's more than food, it's promise. The egg finishes melting in your mouth and you feel something subtle and rare satisfaction. It's not richness, not fullness, just balance. The egg knew exactly what you needed tonight, and it delivered. Someone at the table starts a quiet chant, a blessing, a lullaby. It repeats wordless and gentle looping like the flicker of the fire. The room softens. The faces blur into the shadows. You imagine a monastery distant and silent where monks line up for poached eggs and prayers. A spoon drops. No one reacts. Everyone's too wrapped in their own slow-breathing peace. There's one egg left in the basket. A boy eyes it from across the room. The innkeeper notices and gives him a wink, sliding the basket his way. The boy grins and cradles the egg like it's the crown jewel of dinner, and in a way it is. You rest your spoon. The bowl is empty, the egg a memory, but a good one. Something small and warm to hold on to as the fire dips lower. And for the first time tonight, you feel calm. Not just full, not just tired. Calm. You stretch your fingers across the table thinking maybe, just maybe, the feast has drawn to a close. But then the next course arrives and you realize the medieval meal still has one more trick up its sleeve. Pie. At first you're excited. Who wouldn't be? A warm pie golden crust, maybe something savory nestled inside. But then you remember where and when you are. This is not a buttery, flaky delight. This is a coffin, not a typo. In medieval times, pies were often called coffins, not because they were deadly, though sometimes they probably were, but because they were thick-walled pastry containers meant to hold food not be eaten themselves. More bread bowl than pastry, more shield than snack. You eye the one in front of you. It looks like someone baked a shoe. It's hard, dry, and deeply brown, shaped like a small cauldron with a lid sealed shut. The top has been slashed with a knife in the shape of a cross to let steam escape, or perhaps to ask for divine intervention. You tap the crust. It echoes. Someone next to you pries theirs open with a dagger. Inside, steam rises slowly, revealing something that vaguely resembles meat or mushroom, possibly both. The scent is earthy, savory, and laced with herbs. Your hope flickers. You break open your own. The crust resists, then gives way with a dry crack. The filling steams your face. It smells amazing, rich, peppery, and well-seasoned. Someone in the kitchen cared about this, or maybe had something to prove. You scoop out a bite. Tender chunks of meat or root vegetables or both swim in thick gravy. There's onion thyme, maybe sage. You taste and feel your eyes flutter. After salt pork and dried fish, this is a balm. And the crust, forget it. It's dry, stiff, and has the mouthfeel of damp wood. But that's okay. It wasn't made to be eaten. It was meant to hold the filling while it baked in the hearth, to keep the good stuff from burning or leaking or evaporating into the tavern's rafters. Historians still argue whether people ever ate the coffins or simply scooped the insides out and tossed the crusts to the poor or the pigs. Some say they were eaten the next day softened with broth. Others say you'd have to be truly desperate. Judging by the way the crust flakes like pottery when you touch it, you're inclined to agree. The man across from you is using his crust as a spoon. Ingenious. He breaks off a stiff curl and dips it into the filling, letting it soak before biting. You try the same. It's edible, barely. A woman tears hers into strips and hands them to her children, who treat them like toys more than food. One child chews on the crust with the same commitment you'd use to tackle old leather. Still, there's no denying it. The filling is good, complex, comforting. A pocket of warmth in a cold world. And pies like these weren't just tavern fare. In wealthier homes, they'd be shaped into elaborate forms, castles, animals, even boats. Sometimes with live birds inside, ready to fly out in surprise when the lid was removed. You imagine trying that here. The bird wouldn't make it far before someone roasted it. You eat slowly now, thoughtfully. The crust absorbs the stew, softening slightly. You find a piece of carrot, a pearl of barley, a scrap of meat, tender enough to flake apart under your spoon. And for the first time tonight, you feel something close to indulgence. A woman nearby whispers a tale about a noble wedding feast where pies were stacked 3 high, filled with fish file and fruit in layers. Each slice a surprise. You smile. Sounds exhausting and delicious. You glance down at your own coffin again. It's collapsing slightly now, the edges soggy from gravy. You break off another piece, dip it and chew. It still tastes like flour and old ambition. But the filling makes up for it. The fire has burned down to glowing logs. Shadows stretch across the wall. The tavern's hum has softened into a lullaby of spoon sighs and low murmurs. Someone snores softly in the corner. Another hums the same tune as before, wordless, slow, almost sacred. You set your spoon down. The coffin sits half-eaten before you like a monument to practicality. You respect it. You may not finish it, but you understand it now. It wasn't meant to delight. It was meant to hold. And sometimes that's enough. You lean back again, full of pie filling and philosophical admiration for crusts that double as cookware, wondering what else the evening could possibly throw at you. That's when the scent hits thick, sweet, a little burnt, and wholly unexpected. Dessert. You blink. Dessert in a medieval tavern is not a guaranteed course. In fact, it's a rare luxury. But tonight's crowd must have brought in decent coin, or at least a barrel of gossip worth its weight in sugar, because out comes a platter of what the cook declares with something close to pride as frumenti. Frumenti, a wheat porridge but festive, a dish that's trying to be pudding without the budget for it. You lean in and get your first good look. Cracked wheat, boiled in milk or broth, depending on who was in charge, sweetened with honey, maybe spiced if luck held. And on rare occasions like this, one raisins. Possibly. You scoop a portion into your bowl. It glistens slightly with the thick, grainy consistency of something determined to be filling whether you like it or not. You take a bite. It's warm, gently sweet. The wheat is soft, yielding not mushy. The honey clings to your teeth. A few bits of dried fruit provide tiny explosions of tartness. It's genuinely pleasant. Frumenti was a holiday dish, a feast day treat, often eaten during Christmas or Easter celebrations, when the church permitted indulgence and bellies were temporarily permitted to swell. It could be rich and buttery in noble homes, made with almond milk and studded with imported fruit. In places like this, it was warm, honest, and once again, doing its best. Historians still argue whether frumenti began as a savory side or a sweet dish. Some records show it paired with venison or fish, others with cinnamon and cream. Tonight's version walks the line. You think there's nutmeg. You're not sure. Could be burnt crust dust. The man beside you sighs after his first spoonful. Tastes like Sundays, he murmurs. You nod in agreement. This is comfort, medieval comfort. If bean paste is a necessity, frumenti is a hug. Someone asks if this batch has been blessed. The cook replies that all his food is holy because only the Lord can explain what's in it. A few chuckles rise from tired throats. A boy dances past the fire holding his bowl high like a torch. He's sticky with honey and joy, and nobody tells him to sit down. A rare moment of sweetness is sacred here, both the dish and the feeling. You take another bite and hit something unexpected. Is that an almond? Maybe just a very soft stone. You chew carefully. No harm done. Another woman spoons frumenti into a crust from the earlier pie, forming a kind of makeshift tart. You try it. It works. The crust soaks up the sweetness, softens, transforms. You finally understand the logic of making things edible by sheer layering. One man at the far end of the room raises a crusted bowl and offers a toast to the wheat that sticks to your ribs and your soul. A wave of agreement moves through the room, not loud but deep. Everyone knows what this is, a reward, a brief break from the harshness of survival. Even the dog gets some. A small bowl placed on the hearth, licked clean before you can blink. You remember that sugar in this time wasn't just expensive, it was exotic, imported, controlled, sometimes sold in apothecaries as if it were medicine, and maybe it was in its own way, a balm, a joy, a rush of sweetness to remind people that life could still be kind now and then. Tonight's frumenti isn't overflowing with sugar, but it has enough to lift the corners of your mouth, enough to make your shoulders relax, enough to make you forget briefly the hard crust, the dried fish, and the aggressive enthusiasm of salt pork. You scrape the bowl clean. The spoon hits the bottom with a satisfying clink, and you pause to savor the last flavor on your tongue, honey and grain. A simple, honest taste. It lingers. A candle flickers out. Another follows. The fire settles deeper into its embers, and across the tavern full bellies begin to still. You breathe slowly, not just satisfied, but content. The kind that only comes when you didn't expect sweetness and got it anyway. The last traces of frumenti sweetness cling to your tongue as the tavern shifts once again. A second wind of chatter swirls around you, lighter, now warmer. Something about dessert changes the mood even in the Middle Ages. And just when you think that was the final course, the cook surprises everyone by bringing out a basket wrapped in cloth. He sets it down and lifts the edge to reveal small, irregular slices of golden brown cornbread. Cornbread. You blink. Corn or maize wasn't common in medieval Europe. It came later after the Columbian Exchange. But you realize this is something else. A dense barley or oat loaf sweetened with honey and maybe laced with egg yolk. It's what passes for cake tonight. A slice is handed to you, warm, coarse crumbed, crusty on the edges, but soft inside. You tear it open with your fingers and inhale. The scent is rich and nutty, carrying a hint of roasted grain and something faintly floral, chamomile maybe, or just imagination massaged by fatigue and ale. You take a bite and you pause. It's good. Not just passable or tolerable, genuinely good. Slightly sweet, with a chewy, hearty texture that anchors you in your seat. It reminds you of something homey, like how bread should always want to taste. This kind of cake, if you can call it that, was usually reserved for saints' days or weddings. a celebration. It may not have been fluffy or refined, but it was baked with care, and that made all the difference. It's the kind of bread that's handed to you by someone smiling. A man beside you breaks his slice in half and offers it to the bard, who accepts it like a blessing. Music resumes soft, aimless strumming as the last candles shiver in their pools of wax. Someone drizzles a bit of honey over their cake, letting it soak in. Another stabs his with a knife and balances it atop his mug like a flag. A quiet contest forms whose piece lasts longest before being stolen. You cradle your slice like treasure. There's no rush. Every bite settles in your stomach like a warm stone in cold water, sending calm through your limbs. Cake in the medieval world wasn't standardized. It could mean anything from boiled puddings to baked fruit loaves to dense spice breads made with breadcrumbs and wine. In monasteries, cooks made soul cakes to honor the dead. In village fairs, cakes were prizes thrown hoarded or even fought over. Historians still argue whether early cakes were truly sweet or simply sweetened by comparison to everything else. Some sources claim molasses, others use dried fruit, but most agree it wasn't about decadence. It was about joy, a fleeting pause in a hard life. And tonight, in this tavern, it's working. Your second bite is slower, savoring the crispy crust, the softness beneath. It flakes slightly at the edge, then crumbles across your fingers. You lick the crumbs without shame. You are far beyond the stage of shame tonight. A young girl nearby shares her slice with her baby brother, who giggles with every mushy mouthful. The bard shifts into a lullaby, and the tavern exhales in rhythm with the notes. Even the cook leans against the hearth now, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded. You wonder what the bread was baked in. A clay oven, probably, maybe in the coals, wrapped in leaves, turned slowly on a flat stone or tin sheet, balanced over fire. It carries that kind of rustic patience, the kind of food you don't rush or replicate easily. You reach the final bite and hesitate. It feels like the last note of a song you don't want to end, but you eat it anyway. Soft, faintly sweet, gone too soon. You place your fingers on the empty plate and smile. Across the room, someone calls out, "Next time, bring honey butter." Another responds, "Next time, bring teeth." Laughter stirs again, soft and worn in, like the benches themselves. And just like that, the feast is truly done. There's no fanfare, no bell, just a slow settling of bodies, a folding into cloaks, a clink of empty mugs, and the creak of tired backs. You pull your hood over your head, not out of cold, but ceremony, the last meal of the day, the last sweetness on your tongue, and now only night remains. You shift on the bench, one hand still resting on the empty plate where the last crumb of cake once sat. Around you, the tavern has slipped into a slower rhythm. But then it comes something entirely different, not food, but conversation. Talk of bread. Not just any bread, white bread, the kind the nobility eats, the kind you probably smelled once passing a manor house kitchen before being chased off by someone holding a ladle like a club. Someone at the end of the table begins describing it like it's a myth. Soft as clouds, he says, stretching the words like dough. So white, you'd think it was made of moonlight. Someone else scoffs. Sounds like a ghost loaf. You chuckle, but inside you're curious. Your bread, the one you eat daily, is coarse, dark, heavy. It's made from rye or barley ground between rough stones, sometimes mixed with oats peas, or even sawdust when times were tight. It's hard. It cracks instead of tearing. It lasts forever, mostly because it takes forever to chew. But white bread that was sifted flour, fine, bleached soft, baked by professionals in town ovens, served to priests, lords, and anyone too rich to have jaw muscles. In some records, it was compared to cake, though that might have been generous flattery by a peasant scribe with wishful taste buds. Historians still argue whether white bread was truly tastier or whether its appeal was more about status. After all, color in food signaled class. Pale bread said you were rich enough to have pure flour. Dark bread said you were mortal like the rest of us. You glance back at the crusts on the table, brown, thick, and already curling at the edges. Earlier, you might have cursed them under your breath. Now, there's something endearing about their stubbornness. You take another bite from a leftover wedge. The crust is firm, but the inside has softened with time and steam from the meal. It tastes nutty, honest. No tricks, no airs. Someone next to you starts tearing a loaf apart piece by piece, setting crumbs aside for tomorrow's pottage. Waste not. You remember hearing that in some towns bakers were required by law to mark their loaves and had to provide a baker's dozen 13 instead of 12 to ensure no short-weighted loaves slipped through. Bread fraud was a serious offense. People trusted bread like a contract. It was foundational, sacred. A bad loaf could cause riots. One old man near the fire starts mumbling about a famine a winter long past where people fought in the street over a chunk of oat bread half covered in soot. Everyone listens. No one laughs. Bread isn't funny when it disappears. In contrast, noble households had tiers of bread. Literally, the finest for the master, a rougher grade for the servants. The worst for the dogs, though. Sometimes you suspect the dogs won the lottery. You imagine white bread now, light, fluffy, maybe still warm. The kind that collapses when you press it between your fingers. Would you even like it? Or would it dissolve too quickly, vanish, before your stomach even knew what happened? You chew your brown crust again, and for the first time, you taste more than just grain. You taste security, weight, a meal that lingers, something that stays with you through labor storms and long nights beside the hearth. The bard sings something low and slow a tune about wheat fields in summer. It doesn't rhyme. It doesn't need to. Someone passes a chunk of bread across the table to a sleeping child who wakes just enough to grab it before curling back up, crust still in hand. A lullaby in carbohydrate form. And though your mind still drifts to that mythical white loaf, you realize what you have is enough. Maybe not fluffy, maybe not moonlight, but it's here. It fills the cracks. It gets you through. You take one last bite. The crust splinters. The grain settles. You smile into the flickering firelight and think bread may not end wars, but it keeps people standing through them. The fire has burned down to low embers, now deep, pulsing orange like the belly of a forge after midnight. Most of the tavern has gone quiet, full not just with food, but with the hush that follows storytelling, drinking, and slow digestion. But one voice rises, not loud, just purposeful. A bearded man in a patched cloak leans forward with a grin and says, "You know what's worth more than all this bread?" He holds up a small cloth pouch, unknots it, and spills the contents onto the table. Spices. The table tilts forward. Even the bard stops strumming. In the flickering light, tiny pinches of color scatter across the wood, dark threads of saffron flakes of dried ginger, a single curled stick of cinnamon, a few precious black peppercorns. The scent wafts up like heat, cutting through the tavern's thick stew of smoke and sweat and baked grain. You lean in. You've never smelled anything like this up close. It's sharp, complex, a little intoxicating. You pick up the cinnamon stick. It's dry, brittle, but it smells like warmth, like faraway places, like ships and promises. Spices in the Middle Ages were a luxury so extreme they were almost mythical. Entire trade routes, dangerous winding paths through desert seas, and rival empires existed just to bring pepper to people's tables. Wars were fought over cloves, fortunes made over nutmeg. Tonight, you're seeing just a handful, and yet you know instinctively this is more valuable than any meal you've had in months. A woman nearby takes a single peppercorn and crushes it between her fingers. The scent cuts through the air. Someone sneezes. Historians still argue whether spices were used more to preserve food, to mask spoilage, or to flaunt wealth. Likely all three. But tonight, the man who carries the pouch does none of that. He doesn't use the spices, he just shows them. As if revealing treasure to a room of dreamers. He lets each person take a whiff, maybe touch a sliver of ginger, but no one eats them. They're too precious. This is not for seasoning. This is for knowing. Someone says that much saffron could buy a goat. Another replies that much pepper could start a fight. You believe both. You sit quietly, hands clasped, watching the pouch move from one person to the next. The presence of it changes the room. People straighten up, speak more softly. There's reverence here, like a relic has entered the space. And maybe that's exactly what it is. You remember hearing that in noble courts, spices were used with wild abandon. Meat glazed in cinnamon and cloves. Fruit pies spiced with nutmeg and pepper. Even wine mulled with herbs and sweetened with sugar cane. Meanwhile, peasants made do with mustard seeds, wild garlic, maybe parsley if it hadn't frozen. But this is from somewhere else. A ship, a caravan, a market stall in Venice or Constantinople or beyond. You suddenly understand why nobles locked up their spice cabinets and kept the keys on chains around their necks. You do the same. Eventually, the pouch returns to its owner. He gathers the fragments back into the cloth, knots it tightly, and tucks it away beneath his tunic. The spell breaks gently, but the smell lingers. You sit back, eyes slightly stinging from the pepper stomach, still faintly humming with pie and bread. That whiff of spice was just a whisper, but it gave you more than flavor. It gave you a glimpse of something rare, a reminder that the world is wider than this room, that even in hard times wonders pass through. The bard resumes strumming, a new tune, lower, slower, like the memory of a dance. Someone begins to hum along. You close your eyes and let the spices linger in your nose, the warmth in your belly, and the music in your ears. No, you didn't eat them, but somehow they fed you anyway. The warmth of those spices still curls in your nostrils as the tavern drifts deeper into the hush of late night. Your half-dozing chin tilted toward your chest when another scent drifts in this one sharper cooler. The faint sweetness of something foreign and curious. You open your eyes just enough to see a man at the next table unwrapping a bundle of dried fruits. Your curiosity perks up. Dried fruits were another rare delicacy in the medieval world, more precious than pies, more elusive than meat. Dates, figs, prunes, raisins, anything that could be preserved without spoiling was gold, especially in the colder seasons. And tonight, apparently, someone has brought a little treasure chest of them into this smoky tavern. He lays them out carefully like stones, dark purple prunes shriveled but soft, a few slivered almonds, and one, yes, an apricot faded orange and wrinkled like an old smile. You watch as others lean in to look. No one grabs. Dried fruit demands respect. The man offers you one, a fig sticky and seed-filled. You nod and accept it gently, half worried it'll dissolve under your fingers. But it doesn't. It's dense, satisfying. You bite. The sweetness blooms immediately, rich, sun-warmed, and impossibly vibrant after a night of bean salt and boiled roots. The seeds crunch softly. The flesh melts. You chew slowly, grateful for every second. Someone mutters, "Haven't had one since Michaelmas." Another replies, "Lucky you." And lucky indeed. Dried fruits were typically imported or hoarded. Raisins came in from Spain. Dates, if you could get them from even further east. Even local plums had to be sun-dried and carefully stored to make it through the hunger months. Historians still argue whether common folk had regular access to these goods or only glimpsed them at market stalls and manor tables. There's evidence of small trade routes, pilgrims carrying dried apples from one village to another, monks selling fig paste to fund church repairs. But most agreed to taste something this sweet in winter was a miracle wrapped in a wrinkle. You finish your fig slowly, savoring the last sugary trace. It sticks to your teeth. You don't mind. Across the table, a young couple shares a single prune, giggling as the man pretends to barter his half for a kiss. She laughs, then eats both halves before he can object. Fair trade? Others start passing around their own hidden treasures. Someone produces candied orange peel. Another, a small jar of preserved cherries steeped in something strong. You wonder where they came from. Who saved them, and for how long? Even the cook joins in, dragging out a cloth-wrapped jar of something thick and amber-colored, possibly quince paste or medlar jelly. He spoons out tiny tastes onto knife tips, passing them like relics. You accept one, the tartness bursting on your tongue like sudden sunlight. Dried fruits and preserved sweets had another life beyond food. They were medicine bribes, tokens of affection, even offering to the dead. A single candied fig could earn favor with a merchant. A jar of pear jam might pass from bride to mother to daughter. A woman down the bench shares a story about a ghost cake, a wintertime loaf made entirely of dried apples, cloves, and stale bread baked in memory of those who'd passed. She says it smells like sadness and comfort at the same time. You believe her. The dried apricot makes its way to you at last. You hesitate, but the group insists. It's the last one, someone says. Eat it like you mean it. You do. It's tangy and soft, a little leathery, but beautiful. A burst of summer caught in amber. The tavern settles again. Spoons clink against ceramic as people scrape jars clean. Fingers swipe at smears of fruit jelly. A few quietly pocket leftover pieces for the road home, or maybe to savor alone by candlelight. The man who brought the fruit finally leans back, satisfied. "That's the last of my Christmas stash," he says, voice low. "Guess it's spring now." And it feels like it. Despite the chill, despite the hard benches and shared blankets and smoky ceiling, there's something hopeful in the air. You close your eyes. One bite of sweetness. That's all it took to remember that not every flavor in life has to be bitter. You're full now of stories of strange textures of warmth that started in your gut and crept outward like rising bread. You didn't expect dessert, let alone sweetness, and certainly not in the form of shared apricots and laughter. And just as you're about to drift, one more flavor enters the room. Subtle, smoky, bitter. A murmur passes down the bench, and you realize the final drink of the night is being poured. Cowboy coffee. No worse. It's medieval coffee's rougher cousin, a bitter black brew made from scorched barley dried roots. Or when someone was feeling particularly ambitious, roasted acorns. You're handed a small wooden cup. It's warm in your hand, steam curling from its surface like an omen. You bring it to your nose and inhale. Burnt. You sip. Worse than burnt. It tastes like dirt boiled with resentment. Like someone tried to remember what coffee was supposed to be and then made something that hated your mouth for asking. And yet, you keep sipping because even in its harshness, it offers comfort, warmth, focus, a sense that the day is finished, the meal is done, and sleep is on the horizon. This drink, whatever it actually is, was common in homes too poor to afford actual imported coffee, which wouldn't even become popular in Europe until centuries later. But the craving for a hot, dark, grounding brew, that's been around forever. Some used chicory root, others dandelions, fennel seeds, or bits of toasted grain. The goal wasn't flavor, it was ceremony. You take another sip, still terrible, but it's starting to grow on you. Or maybe your tongue's just given up. Historians still argue whether such brews were made out of tradition, necessity, or the simple fact that hot water tastes better than cold regrets. In truth, it was all three. People needed warmth, ritual, something to mark the end of the day with a final bitter note. Across the table, someone dumps in a bit of honey from a communal pot. Another slices their dried fruit into it, swirling until the flavors blur. You try the same, dropping the stub of a prune into your cup. It helps. Slightly. You sip again and listen to the quiet. The bard has stopped playing. Now he's just humming. A low, steady vibration that echoes softly through the beams overhead. One man leans over his mug, breathing in the steam like he's trying to extract a vision. Another stares into his as though the foam might spell out his future. It doesn't, but he keeps staring anyway. You finish your drink and feel it settle in your chest, a gentle heaviness. The edges of the tavern blur, not from ale, but from contentment. The fire's nothing but embers now, a red glow that makes shadows flicker like lazy ghosts on the wall. Someone stokes it quietly, more out of habit than need. You hear the soft scrape of iron on stone, then silence again. Outside wind presses gently against the shutter. Inside, you exhale long and slow. That cup, bitter and strange, was the closing bell, the end note of a song sung in stew and crusts and jokes about eel. A full stop at the end of a day built on labor, laughter, and survival. You set the cup down. It rocks slightly, then settles. Like you. The man beside you stretches, groans quietly, then slumps sideways and begins to snore. No one minds. No one wakes him. You lean your elbows on the table and rest your head in your hands. The bitterness on your tongue fades. What lingers is the warmth, the memory of frumenti, the smell of spice. the apricot soft and gold, and the drink awful as it was pulled it all together. Sometimes the end doesn't have to taste good. It just has to mean done. Your head's still cradled in your hands when something new catches your attention. Not a smell this time, not a sound, but the gleam of metal. The man beside you shifts, and from beneath his cloak, something glints on his arm. A knife? No, a spoon. You blink. It's carved, polished, even a little ornate. Its bowl is wider than yours, the handle engraved with a simple twist of lines, nothing noble, but more than plain. He notices you looking and smiles. "Made it myself," he says, "from apple wood." He turns it over in his hand. The firelight dances on its curve. He doesn't offer it. No one shares spoons. But he does set it gently on the table, letting you look. You hadn't thought about it before, but almost everyone here is eating with their own tools. A knife tied to a belt. A spoon tucked into a boot or bound with twine around a bowl. In medieval taverns, utensils weren't supplied. You brought them, like a toothbrush for the soul. You reach for yours. It's plain, bone-handled, slightly warped. You've had it for weeks, maybe months, and never really noticed its growing bend. But suddenly it feels like more than a tool. It's your companion, your personal slice of civilization in a world that still wipes its hands on hay. Historians still argue whether the peasantry used spoons regularly or simply scooped with bread fingers or when desperate hollowed out crusts. The truth? All of it. It depended on where you were, who you were, and how many spoons you'd broken. Wooden spoons were most common, easy to carve, hard to ruin. Bone came next, metal rare. If you had one of those, you probably had a second cloak and your own loaf of white bread. Tonight, spoons are everywhere, resting on bowls tucked behind ears, slurped and scraped and occasionally brandished mid-story. They are like fingerprints, each slightly different, worn by time and teeth and taste. You remember hearing about monks who were buried with their spoons? About soldiers who tied them to belts beside their swords? About old women who passed theirs down through generations like tiny ladles of memory? One woman near the hearth has a spoon so blackened by fire it looks forged. She uses it like a wand, commanding her stew to yield its secrets. You admire her confidence. A man drops his by accident, and it clatters on the dirt floor. He curses, retrieves, spits on it, wipes it on his sleeve, and goes right back to eating. No one bats an eye. Utensils are more than convenience. They're extension, identity. You could lose your cloak or your belt and be fine. But your spoon, that's you. You turn yours in your fingers. The handle is smooth, not from design, but from your own use thumb grip bite. The shallow groove on one side isn't a flaw, it's proof. It's where you press. You suddenly understand why some people carve initials into the back, why others wrap the handles with leather or cord. It's not about style, it's about belonging. The bard starts another soft tune, this one about a fisherman who loses his favorite spoon at sea and must eat with his hands until Neptune gives it back in a dream. It's absurd. It's beautiful. You nearly tear up. Across the room, someone carves a new spoon, right now whittling with slow, deliberate strokes. Not because they lost one, but because they want to give it away. To a child, to a friend, to someone with nothing but an empty bowl. That's the real story of medieval dining, not what's in the bowl, but who holds the spoon. You put yours down carefully, like you're saying thank you. Then you fold your arms, rest your chin, and let your eyes close again. The fire crackles once more. Someone laughs quietly in their sleep. A spoon hits the floor again and isn't picked up. The night deepens, and somewhere in that haze of bread crusts, barley coffee, and apricot breath, you dream not of banquets or gold, but of a spoon that always fits your hand. The tavern is nearly still now, just the occasional murmur, the faint jingle of someone's belt as they shift in sleep, and the soft hiss of firewood curling inward on itself. You're about to drift entirely when a new presence stirs nearby. A figure enters through the creaking door, not loud, not announced, just there, cloaked, tall, and carrying something under one arm, a book. Your eyes follow as they move toward a bench near the hearth. They sit, open the book slowly, reverently, and begin to read aloud, not to anyone in particular, but into the room itself. Their voices low, smooth, and oddly soothing. No drama, no flair, just rhythm. You can't make out every word. The language is old, or at least pronounced differently. But the cadence is familiar parables, riddles, tiny miracles wrapped in metaphor. You're surprised. Books in this world are rare, precious things. They take months to make, copied by hand, letter by letter, on parchment made from stretched animal skin. Ink expensive. Labor exhausting. One slip of the quill and a page might be ruined. And yet here it is. A book being read aloud by firelight to a room of sleepy farmers, merchants, travelers, and one spoon-gripping dreamer. You lean back, letting the voice wash over you. In medieval life, storytelling wasn't a luxury, it was survival. It taught, it warned, it passed time in the endless dark of winter. Some tales explained why lightning struck, others why bread always fell butter side down. Some held hope like a candle, others warned that the woods were never really empty. Historians still argue whether books like these were read aloud in taverns or only in churches and noble courts. Likely both, depending on who carried them and why. Traveling priests, wandering monks, or someone like this, part scholar, part vagabond, carrying stories like seeds. The reader continues. It's a fable, you think? A fox, a wheel of cheese, a very proud bird. You know this one. You smile before the ending even comes. Across the room, someone chuckles. Another murmurs the last line before the reader reaches it. Others hum softly in tune, as if the tale has a melody. The bard listens now, too, cradling his lute like a sleeping child. You watch the firelight dance across the reader's hands. Their fingers are ink-stained nails, chipped. They've turned these pages many times before. You can see it in the smoothness of the corners, the slight curl of vellum warmed by breath and handling. And in that moment, you realize you're witnessing something sacred. Not a feast, not a sermon, just sharing. A story told aloud in a space full of full bellies and heavier eyelids. The reader closes the book gently without a flourish. They tuck it back beneath their cloak nod to the room and lean against the wall like any other traveler. No applause, just silence. The satisfied kind. You wonder where they'll go tomorrow. What town? What tavern? What story they'll read next. You imagine following them, living from bread and fable, curling beside fires and reading tales to people who don't even know they needed one. A man beside you whispers, "That was the cheese story. My father told it to me during the famine." He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. You stretch your legs beneath the table, exhale through your nose, and close your eyes again. Not to sleep just yet, but to keep the story warm inside your chest a bit longer. Books were rare, but stories, those could live in voices and crumbs and calloused hands and soot-covered spoons. And tonight, you got one for free. Sleep tugs gently at your limbs now, like a wool blanket that's finally warmed, but the tavern still has one more tale to offer. Not spoken, not eaten, but etched. You shift your gaze downward to the table's surface and see it notched into the wood. Faint but deliberate a symbol. A simple X over a crescent. You run your fingers over it. Shallow, weather-worn, forgotten, but still there. You glance around. Another, near the bench leg, and another carved into the base of a wooden post barely visible in the firelight. Symbols, marks, messages left behind by people you'll never meet. Medieval taverns and homes alike were full of such secret carving signs left by travelers, thieves, lovers, and loners. Not writing, not quite, but signs, hints, warnings, prayers. Some were apotropaic, meant to ward off evil, a pair of concentric circles to keep away the devil. A VV scratched beside a doorway to invoke the protection of the Virgin Mary. Others were directions-coded messages or graffiti made by bored hands and sharp knives. You remember hearing about the old practice of witch marks, tiny symbols chiseled into hearths and doors to keep out curses, wolves, or worse. People feared what they couldn't see, and when words failed, they used marks. Historians still argue whether these signs were religious, magical, or just habit. The truth likely shifts between all three. In a world where reading was rare and parchment was priceless wood, became a poor man's page. You lean closer to one near your elbow. It's a spiral interrupted halfway through, as if whoever was carving it was interrupted or changed their mind. You wonder who they were, what they feared, what they hoped the spiral would protect. You look again at the table's edge. Someone's etched the name Isabel. Just that. No date, no flourish. You imagine her sitting where you are, knife in hand, carving slowly, or waiting for soup or answers. You glance over to the wall near the hearth. There's a slash of blackened soot, shaped like a bird. No one claims it. No one cleans it. The room in its silence breathes these symbols in. They live between the grain of wood and the lines of stories. A man nearby notices you tracing the carvings. He lifts his hand, shows you a scar on his palm, long, thin, healed poorly. Sliced myself carving a wheel, once he says. Tavern in Litchfield. He smiles at the memory like it still hurts in a fond way. You smile back. You think of all the marks your own hands have left in the world, not just here, but in fences, repaired bread-scored spoons, worn smooth paths, walked 100 times without thought. Your marks may not be etched in wood, but they're there. A gust of wind rattles the shutters. The fire flares just for a moment, illuminating the carvings like stars in wood grain. You trace the X and crescent again, slower this time, letting your fingers memorize the shape. It doesn't need translation. It just is. In medieval times, history wasn't stored in books alone. It was scratched into beams, pressed into clay, inked onto skin, whispered in prayers, and passed through spoons and symbols. You feel the truth of that now. This table is a story. This wall, this room, not yours entirely, but for tonight, you're part of it. You press your palm to the wood just beside Isabel's name and let it rest there. No mark, no knife, just warmth. Your own quiet way of saying I was here too. The tavern has become more dream than a place now, shadows softening into corners, the fire down to a glow no brighter than a heartbeat. And as you sit with your hand still pressed to the table, a voice stirs behind you. Not a shout, not a song, just a whisper. Did you see the tattoo? You turn your head, slowly unsure if you heard it at all. But the man next to you nods toward the cook who's dozing on a stool, arms crossed, chin tucked against his chest. You squint in the low light. On his forearm, partly hidden by a rolled sleeve, you see it ink, faded, blue-black. A symbol not unlike one of the carvings on the table. It's circular, almost like a sun with a line slashing through the center. Not decorative, not fashionable. A tattoo. In the medieval world, tattoos weren't common, but they weren't unknown either. Crusaders sometimes returned from the Holy Land marked with tiny crosses. Pilgrims tattooed their wrists or forearms with sacred symbols from Jerusalem, believing they offered divine protection or proof they'd made the journey. Others bore marks less holy. Criminals, runaways, soldiers, some by choice, others not. Some marked their skin so they couldn't be mistaken for someone else. Or so they would be. You study the cook's mark. It's too worn to decipher clearly, but it feels old, chosen, a history buried in the skin. A woman across the table rolls up her sleeve in response, revealing a single ink dot on her inner wrist. "My sister and I," she says softly, "when the war ended." She lets the sleeve fall again. No one asks what war. No one has to. You start noticing more now. A man leaning by the door has a pair of vertical lines tattooed on his thumb. A counting system, maybe. Another wears a faded rune on the side of his neck. Norse, possibly, though it's been years since it meant anything clear. A younger boy, barely old enough to grow whiskers, has what looks like a crude fish inked near his collarbone. You begin to wonder, are they all pilgrims, fighters, survivors? Or are these simply their own kind of secret language, their own tattoos for themselves in a world where ink was story and skin was parchment? Historians still argue whether tattoos were widespread among the poor or mainly seen among seafarers and crusaders. Some say they were signs of spiritual devotion. Others think they were reminders etched into flesh of things too important to forget. You glance at your own arm, bare, warm, marked only by firelight. Would you mark it? Would you carve something of your life onto your skin, a symbol to say I was here, I survived this, I believe in that? The bard, noticing the mood shift, begins to hum again, this time something quieter, almost reverent. The fire reflects in his eyes. He's seen marks like these before. Someone to your right says, "I once met a man with a map inked onto his chest. Said it would lead him home even if he forgot the way." The table is quiet for a long time after that. The cook stirs, adjusts his sleeve, and the tattoo disappears beneath the fabric. Hidden once more, but not forgotten. You sit with that silence a little longer, letting the idea of ink and skin, of stories worn and carried, settle into your bones. These people don't need books. Their bodies are their scrolls, their scars, their scripts. The tavern creaks gently. You shift your weight, feeling the imprint of the bench on your legs, the spoon still tucked into your belt. And for a second, you wonder if someone saw you centuries from now, what would they guess about your story? What mark would you leave behind? Maybe not ink, maybe not carvings, maybe just warmth, maybe just this. A yawn escapes you, long, slow, the kind that starts behind the eyes and travels through your shoulders. The room around you breathes in rhythm. Someone stokes the fire with half a mind still in dreams. Others are already curled up, cloaked and quiet, their feet tucked under benches, heads leaned together like drowsy dominoes. You close your eyes for a moment just to listen. The soft rustle of cloth, the low, rough breathing of sleep. Somewhere a spoon clinks to the floor and rolls unnoticed into shadow. You open your eyes again when you hear the faint squeal of iron hinges. At the back of the tavern, a small side door creaks open, and in steps a man with a bundle slung over one shoulder, worn boots, thin frame, eyes that carry the dust of distant roads. He's the kind of traveler you've seen before, a peddler maybe, or a messenger, or someone who's left more places than he's ever stayed. But what he carries isn't food or firewood, it's locks and keys. He drops the bundle gently on a table near the wall, unrolls the cloth, and spreads out his collection like a magician laying out cards. Tiny padlocks, rusted iron keys, bent brass pins, a ring of wooden toggles, one that looks like it belongs to a castle gate, another so small it might fit a jewelry box or a secret. The room doesn't stir much, just a few curious glances. This is a quiet performance, not a spectacle. He picks up a lock and sets it gently into his palm. It's shaped like a heart, or maybe a beetle. The keyhole grins at you. In the medieval world, locks were more than security. They were identity, privacy, ownership. Few people locked their doors. What would you be keeping out? Or in but chests had locks, strong boxes, caskets, things that held letters, tokens, or if you were lucky, coin. Historians still argue whether locks were common among the peasantry or reserved for merchants and nobles. But evidence of simple pinlock sliding bolts and hand-carved key mechanisms appears all over on barn doors, ale barrels, even confession boxes. You watch as the man lifts a key to a particularly elegant lock. It clicks softly. The room notices. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Each lock is its own tale. You lean forward, studying the keys. No two are alike. Some are long and curled like vines. Others are blunt and utilitarian, just iron rods with square teeth. One has a small bell attached, which jingles faintly when moved. You wonder what it protected or warned. Then the man does something odd. He picks up a blank key, uncut, untouched, and sets it down on the table beside a candle. Just that. No lock, no story, just potential. And suddenly, it feels like an invitation. You think about what you would lock away if you had that key, or what you'd unlock. A memory, a name, a door long closed. There's power in a key. More than metal, it's a promise, a boundary, a whisper that some things are yours. A child approaches wide-eyed, and the man hands him a tiny key the size of a thumbnail. The child holds it to his chest like it's magic, and maybe it is. Another woman picks up a key and turns it over in her fingers. Used to have one like this, she says. Kept it under the floorboard. No one asks what for. No one needs to. You look back at the table at the locks with no matches and the keys with no answers and realize most of life is that way. Locks left unopened, keys forgotten at the bottom of bags, secrets you once knew the shape of but lost the words for. The man rolls up his bundle again, slowly, carefully. He ties it shut, slings it over his shoulder, and nods once to the room. Then he leaves through the same door he came in. No one stops him. No one asks his name. And you sit back in your seat, a little heavier and a little lighter all at once. Because even if you don't carry a key, you understand now some things are locked not to be hidden, but to be remembered. The lock bearer's exit leaves behind a hush so complete it could have been scripted. No one speaks. The fire sighs. The wind outside scratches gently against the wood, and then someone chuckles, just once low and amused, and mutters, "Imagine locking up this food." A small wave of tired laughter ripples through the room, breaking the silence like a spoon tapping a crust. You smile. The thought is absurd. Who'd steal the pottage? Who'd hoard the beans? But then the question turns inward. What would you lock up if you could? Not coins or bread or dried apricots. No, something quieter, more private. Memories, maybe. The ones that ache a little too sharp to keep loose in your thoughts. As your eyes drift across the room, you notice them others already curled up for sleep. Cloaks wrapped tight, heads tucked in, boots still on just in case. Some lie across benches, some under them. One woman has made a pillow from a pile of folded burlap sacks and is softly snoring into the stitching. And scattered across the room in tucked corners and along shelves are bundles, belongings, wrapped tight in cloth, some large bulging with extra tunics, tools, and bread ends, others so small you wonder what they contain. A carved spoon, a lock of hair, a single coin, a letter never sent. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants carried keepsakes the way we imagine. Some say survival left no room for sentiment. Others suggest otherwise, that the poor clung hardest to memory because it was the one thing no tax could touch. You believe the latter now. A man across the room sleeps with one arm around his satchel as though it might wander off without him. A child curls around a lopsided wooden toy. Someone snores softly into a wool sleeve face turned toward the wall. And then you notice it near the hearth, hanging from a hook above the ashes. A key, just one, iron plain old, probably to the back door or the pantry, or maybe nothing at all, but it hangs like punctuation, like the tavern itself remembers. You shift slightly and feel something in your pocket. You reach in and find a scrap of cloth. You forgot it was there, a piece torn from a sleeve long ago, before tonight, maybe before this village. You don't even know why you kept it. You press it between your fingers, feeling the worn threads. No value, no reason, just memory. And maybe that's enough. In the far corner, the bard has stopped playing but still cradles his instrument. His head is tipped back, mouth open in sleep, but his fingers rest gently on the strings just in case. You wonder what lullabies he never got to sing, what songs he saved. The room has dimmed to its final glow now. Candles have drowned in their own wax. Only the hearth gives off light, flickering through the smoky air like a lantern underwater. You look down at your bowl, empty for hours now. The spoon lies across it, quiet and content. And you realize nothing tonight was locked. Not really. The stories were shared. The food was passed. The laughter was loud. The silence was welcome. The doors, though creaky, opened for all. And yet everything feels protected, not by bolts or keys, but by presence. You curl your legs under you and rest your cheek against your sleeve. The fabric smells of smoke and flour and something vaguely sweet, maybe the frumenti, maybe the memory of it. The last thought in your mind is simple. You are full, you are tired, and just for tonight, you have everything you need. The tavern is still, not silent, Not entirely, but still in that deep, steady way that only comes after a full belly and a long day. A fire winding down a room filled with dreams drifting just above the surface of breath. You blink slowly, half asleep, and catch the glint of metal again. But this time it's not a key or a spoon, it's a coin. You watch it spin across the table, clink, clatter, and then rest. Not tossed, not wagered, just spun. A young man retrieves it with practiced fingers, flipping it over his knuckles like a bard playing a note only he can hear. The coin, smooth and worn, its markings barely legible. Could be copper, could be tin. You'd need better light to tell. He notices you watching and gives you a lazy grin. Bread money, he says, or maybe nothing. That's how money worked here. It's not fixed. It's fluid. Value changes with hunger, with distance, with the mood of whoever's holding the scale. You reach into your pouch and feel for yours just a few thin discs warm from your body. You don't even look at them. You already know they'd buy half a loaf, maybe a second-hand belt, or a story, or a bowl of soup if the cook's feeling kind. Coins in the medieval world were inconsistent. Sometimes they were real minted by kings blessed by bishops. Other times they were local tokens, bits of clipped silver, foreign currencies brought in by travelers and somehow folded into the daily math of survival. Historians still argue whether most trade was done with money or barter. In truth, it was both. You might buy bread with a coin on Monday and trade a goat skin for 2 turnips on Thursday. The coin spins again. It wobbles slower this time and finally falls flat with a soft tink. The man studies the side it landed on, then nods to himself. You don't ask what he was deciding. A woman nearby unwraps a small cloth from her lap and reveals 3 mismatched coins, one too shiny, one misshapen, one with a hole drilled through the middle. She presses them between her palms like dice, then drops them into a leather pouch tied with a piece of twine. Another man swears he once found a gold coin in a sheep's stomach. Someone laughs. Someone else asks if he still has it. Of course not, he says. Fed it to a bishop to keep quiet. More laughter. You learn quickly in places like this coins matter, but not as much as stories, or kindness, or good timing. A coin might buy you a meal, but a warm smile might get you 2. A joke might earn you shelter. A favor might earn you safety. You reach into your pocket again and pull out your own coin. It's thin, bent at the edge. You roll it between your fingers, feeling its weight or its lack of one. What could it buy? Bread, a song, a moment of silence. You press it flat against the table and leave it there just for a second, as if to say, I know you, I see you, I'll spend you when it matters. Across the room, someone is flipping their own coin. They catch it, check it, smile. A silent yes. It's strange, you think, how something so small, so cold, could carry so many hopes. Coins don't sparkle here. They don't clink in heavy purses. They rest quietly close to the skin, waiting, sometimes ignored, sometimes guarded with a kind of superstitious reverence. You've heard that some people are buried with them under the tongue or in the hand, not for passage, not for payment, just because, just in case. The fire pops. The coin on the table shifts slightly. You pick it up, turn it once, then slide it back into your pouch. Not tonight. Tonight, everything you need is already paid for. The coin is warm when it slips back into your pouch, its metal clinking softly against a spoon, or maybe just your thoughts. Around you, the tavern settles into that final kind of silence, not empty, but complete. But before your eyes fully close, one last sound reaches you from the far wall, a creaking floorboard, slow and careful. Not sneaky, just deliberate. A woman rises from the shadows, not young, not old, somewhere in between, with hair tied back in a cloth and hands that look like they've baked 1,000 loaves and healed a few wounds in between. She walks with the kind of grace that doesn't come from age or strength, but from knowing. She approaches the hearth and kneels. You think she's going to stoke the fire. Instead, she opens a small leather pouch and takes something out. A ring of keys, no, a bundle of herbs. She begins to scatter them into the fire just a pinch at a time. A few dry leaves, a few twisted stems, and something that smells like sleep wrapped in memory. Lavender sage, maybe mint. The scent curls into the room like a lullaby with no melody. The embers hiss quietly like they're sighing in thanks. No one stirs. But you feel it, the change. The room, already heavy with slumber, seems to lean further into itself. The air grows softer, the warmth thicker, the night deeper. In the medieval world, herbs were medicine, magic, and prayer all rolled into one. They were hung over doorways, tucked into shoes, ground into salves, or steeped into teas, not just for the body, but for the mind, for the soul. Historians still argue whether these rituals were medicinal or superstitious, whether burning mugwort banished spirits or just masked the smell of boiled onions. But those debates don't live here, not in this room, not in this hush. Here, herbs are a language, and the woman, she's speaking it fluently. She murmurs something into the flames, not loud, not in Latin, just soft syllables that feel familiar, even if you can't catch their meaning. A prayer, maybe, a wish, a thank you. She adds another pinch of something sharp, rosemary perhaps. The smoke bites your nose, but just for a second. Then the sweetness returns deeper, now grounding. You breathe it in, through your nose, down into your chest. Sleep is coming, but not the kind that startles or steals you. The kind that arrives like a friend, that brushes your hair back from your forehead and says, "It's okay, you're safe now." You think about other taverns, other beds of straw or dirt, other fires too far away, but none of them feel like this. This room is protected not by locks, not by swords, but by presence, by warmth, by a woman with herbs and quiet hands. She doesn't wear a crown. She doesn't carry a book. But she knows things, old things. You wonder if she's a healer, a midwife, a widow, or just someone who knows when a room needs to rest. She stands, brushes her palms against her apron, and nods to no one in particular. And then she returns to her bench curls and to her cloak, and is gone. But the smell remains, faint, rooted, like sleep itself is steeping in the air. You breathe in once more deeply. You let it fill your lungs. Your mind loosens its grip. Your thoughts slow not from exhaustion, but from peace. No one speaks. No one stirs. The fire sighs. The floorboard stills. And you, tucked in the corner of a night that feels older than time, finally feel ready to let go. By now, the tavern has folded in on itself like a loaf, cooling after the oven, still warm, still fragrant, but softening at the edges, its structure relaxed. Every bench has become a bed. Every whisper has become breath. Every corner is claimed by someone slowly dissolving into sleep. You adjust your cloak, or maybe it adjusts itself around you. Your limbs feel weighted, not heavy, not stiff, just full, like you've been poured into yourself. You scan the room one last time, eyes half lidded, and realize the walls have stories too. There, near the back charcoal markings, not carved, not inked, just sketched onto the wooden wall like someone had an urgent memory to preserve. A small drawing, a circle within a square within a star. You've seen something like it before. A compass, a calendrical charm, or maybe a farmer's way of tracking the solstice, etched while waiting for stew. Nearby, under a candle shelf, is a faded tally, dozens of tiny scratches in rows. Each one a night perhaps, or a debt, or a number of travelers who made it safely home. Someone counted. Someone cared. And higher still, a handprint darkened with soot, too small for an adult, a child. You imagine the laughter, the mischief, the scolding that followed. It's frozen there forever, fingers splayed like an echo. The room isn't empty now. It's full of marks and murmurs of dreams etched invisibly into the rafters. Full of memories made quietly without fanfare, with the soft scrape of a spoon or the still heat of a shared bowl. You let your head rest back against the wall, and for a moment you think of all the travelers who passed through this room. People like you, people not like you. Some who stayed a night, some who stayed years, some who etched their names, others who only left behind breath. You're part of that now, and it comforts you to know that no one here has asked for your story. No one needed your name. You were fed. You were warmed. You were witnessed. A bard's lute still rests by the hearth. Its strings hum softly when the wind sneaks through a gap in the shutters. Not a song, just a reminder I'm still here. You wonder how many songs the lute has sung, how many nights it has stitched together. Music like bread is passed hand to hand, heart to heart. You reach down and press your palm to the floor. Earth, solid. The tavern is built upon it, held by beams cut generations ago. Wood that once swayed in forests now creaks under you, not in protest, but in welcome. You realize you've barely spoken since entering, and yet you've been in conversation all night with bread and steam and stories and silence. A quiet world, but not a lonely one. The fire flares once more just briefly, a final orange breath before its coals begin their descent into blackness. You watch it, dim. Your own eyelids follow. There is nothing more to be done. No debts, no alarms, no expectations. Just this breath, and this one, and this one. Sleep isn't coming anymore. It's here. You don't know how long it's been, minutes or hours. The kind of time that doesn't keep score. Around you, the tavern breathes. That's the only word for it now. The fire no longer burns, it pulses. The rafters no longer creak, they sigh. Even the air feels slower, like it's curling itself into a blanket just above your skin. You shift slightly and feel the worn wood beneath you softened by hundreds of other sleepers. Before you, pilgrims, blacksmiths, children, widows. For a moment, you can almost feel them beside you, not ghosts, just echoes, like the heat still rising from a stone wall long after the sun's gone down. Your breath joins the rhythm of the room, slow, low, steady. The wind nudges at the shutters again. It doesn't knock, it whispers. No urgency, no storm, just a reminder that the outside world still exists and that you're not in it, not tonight, not yet. You hear someone shift in their sleep, followed by a muffled laugh dream-born. Another sighs and curls tighter into their cloak. A child mumbles something about bread. No one stirs beyond that. The tavern protects them, protects you. This isn't a fortress, but it feels like one. In medieval life, Safety was a rare luxury. Most nights were wrapped in cold and fear and aching limbs and thin roofs and uncertain dawns. But not here. Not now. Here, your only responsibility is rest. The candle closest to you has guttered out completely. A soft curl of smoke lingers where it once stood tall. That too seems to exhale. You close your eyes again, just for a second. Behind your lids, images drift, glimpses from the day, the sharp salt of pork, the warmth of frumenty, the spice curled like memory in the air. Faces flicker, laughter without words, the slow turning of a spoon in a bowl. Everything is slowing, even your thoughts, even your heartbeat. You imagine the tavern as a cradle rocking slightly, groaning at the seams, but steady, always steady. There's no clock here, no bell to toll the hour, only the sound of night thickening. Someone near the fire coughs. A hand pats their back in the dark, then silence again. That's all the medicine needed here. Presence. You wonder idly if you'll remember tonight, if this will stay with you, if the feeling of being safe, warm, and completely unimportant in the best possible way will root itself in your bones and whisper back to you on harder days. You hope so, because tonight has no grand event, no climax, no battle won, just shared food, shared space, shared breath, and a door that closed gently behind you when you arrived. That's enough. You pull your cloak tighter, not out of cold, but ritual. The last motion of the night, a blanket for the heart. You're not alone, you're not hungry, you're not afraid. Sleep, when it arrives fully now, does so without knocking. It simply enters and settles beside you. Your breath has slowed so much now, it almost doesn't feel like breathing, more like floating, as if the room itself is carrying you, tucked into its beams and bricks and gently faded wood, like a child swaddled in the arms of something ancient and kind. The fire is a low orange glow, barely flickering. You can't see it anymore unless you open your eyes, and you won't not now. The heat on your cheek tells you it's still there. That's enough. You listen. The tavern is asleep, not just the people, the whole place. You've never heard a room fall asleep before, but now you know what it sounds like, the rustle of wool cloaks, shifting the long exhales of full bellies, the creak of settling beams, and the tiniest ticking sound of cooling iron near the hearth. Even the spoons are resting. You picture them tucked into bowls, handles, resting on bread crusts, their work for the day, complete. Your own spoon rests beside you, curled like a comma after a sentence that doesn't need finishing. There are no more courses, no more tales, just the long, soft silence that follows when everyone agrees without words that nothing more is needed. You feel your heartbeat slow, not from exhaustion, but from acceptance, from ease. It no longer races to survive, it simply beats. Outside, the wind brushes against the tavern like a cat, playful, familiar, unthreatening. A low hoot of an owl answers it. You wonder for a moment if the owl is calling for someone in here. Maybe the bard, maybe the dreamer with the spice pouch, maybe you. You don't answer. You're already elsewhere. Somewhere between the memory of frumenty and the smell of lavender and smoke. Somewhere between a child's laugh and the clink of a coin, spun just for the feel of it. Somewhere you've never been, but somehow always belonged. That's the magic of this night. Not the food, not the fire, but the welcome. The quiet, unspoken truth that even if the stew was thin and the bread was stale, you were part of it. You mattered here. And now, as your mind drifts like mist across old wood and wool blankets, you let go of the last threads holding you upright. You give yourself to sleep not as surrender, but as reunion. The tavern has you. The fire, now down to coals, has you. The night thick with soot and story has you. And you are weightless. You are home. Let yourself soften now. The journey is done. The tavern's warmth still lingers in your chest, a quiet glow pulsing low and steady. Every scent, every spoonful, every murmured voice has quieted into a memory you carry with you. Even as you begin to drift, you can still feel the bench beneath you, but it's no longer hard. It's part of you, like you've grown roots into the wood, or maybe it has curled upward to cradle your spine. Either way, there is no more movement left to make. Your breath slow, and even now carries the rhythm of the fire's final crackle. You don't have to try anymore. You don't have to think. Just let the room rock you gently into sleep, one breath at a time. You are not alone. You are not cold. You are not unfinished. The last ember fades in the hearth, but you don't notice. You are beyond needing light. You have your own now, a quiet glow behind your closed eyes. There is nothing more to do. No door to lock, no coins to count, no stories left to tell. Only this, only stillness. The tavern sleeps, and so do you, long, warm, and deep.